It's week 3, and everybody's on their third stringers by now. Real cool. All right, welcome into a new episode of the Back Sports Page Sunday Morning Fantasy Show. I'm your co-host, Ryan Stern. Joined with me is Derek Mountain, and new to the team is Tom Bennett. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. Better than half of the league who has wound up on injured reserve over the first 2 weeks.
Rip my fantasy team.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling the guys before the show started, I actually have a team with Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey on it. And for what looked like to be a sure playoff contender, which I'm still going to be, but to have those two, to have the wide receiver one, the running back one on your team, and to now having to decide between Russell Gage and Mike Davis in your starting lineup 3 weeks into the season is just not something that you would expect that you were going to be doing. So let's we got to get right into it. Got to get into some of the injury news over the past week. Got to start off with the running back one, and that's Christian McCaffrey. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. They did put him on IR, which I think was a good thing, because that means he's going to be out at least 3 weeks, because I thought McCaffrey would have tried his best to come back even sooner. So they're doing their part to keep him out until he's actually healthy to come back. The big name to pick up for your teams is going to be Mike Davis, but the name that we were talking about that is going to be one of the top waiver wire pickups this coming week. Derek, you were the one who brought up his name.
Yeah, I mean, we both really like this guy, Ryan. It's Curtis Samuel. I mean, this guy is just electric out of the backfield in the slot. He can do it all. And it doesn't matter that Matt Rule and Joe Brady are new to Carolina. They want to get him the ball. This guy already has logged more carries than Mike Davis, who's only seen 1 in 2 weeks. I'm not sure Davis necessarily jumps in and is that RB1. We'll see.
What do you think about that Carolina backfield situation, Tom?
I think they're a relatively deep backfield. If I remember correctly, they also have oh God, I don't want to butcher his name. I'm going to look it up real quick. They have a bunch of deep guys there in the backfield that have starting experience and have gotten touches in the past that are going to be able to kind of do a 3 or 4 wheel cog to make up for what Christian McCaffrey does for that team.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis Samuel was basically what Theo Riddick did at Notre Dame. Started off as, he did the complete opposite. Theo Riddick started off as a wide receiver in college. They moved him into the backfield. Curtis Samuel started off as a running back at Ohio State. They felt that his skill set was more beneficial to the team as a wideout. So, I mean, he's now got the skill set to really handle that sort of, multifaceted pieces to his game. He's not going to be a bell cow. Mike Davis is probably going to lead the team in carries, but it would not shock me if Curtis Samuel led the team in touches out of the running back spot this week.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see if he could be a more successful Ty Montgomery.
Yeah. That's a great name. Ty Montgomery was the only running back who wore 88.
He is a receiver that is running back.
He did not want to give up on the dream of being a wide receiver. But so then if we're talking about McCaffrey, you got to go to possibly the RB2 in some of your leagues in the drafts, and that was Saquon Barkley. The worst part about this is that the play that he had played right before, it looked like he hyperextended his elbow, and we're like, oh no, is it a wrist injury? Is it an elbow injury? He just came down awkwardly on his arm. And we're thinking, oh, he's going to be out maybe for a little while. And he comes back 2 snaps later and like, all right, we got Saquon back. we got Saquon back. And then that very next play tears his ACL, and you knew right away. You knew just by watching him go down, how he grabbed at the leg and then his face. That's not a guy who will show pain. He's got one of the most gifted bodies in the league, and for him to act like that, you knew that something was wrong. So now the Giants go out and they sign probably the biggest name on the market in terms of running backs, and that's Devonta Freeman, formerly from the Atlanta Falcons. And from all I hear is that I wouldn't be surprised to see if Devonta Freeman leads the Giants in carries this week.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this to happen. I took Devonta Freeman in the 10th round of my Dynasty startup draft, and the day he got cut was the day that I drafted him. So I've been sitting here waiting for months for this guy to finally sign. I think he landed a great spot with the Giants.
I think that eventually he's a decent high floor flex guy, but this week I'm staying away.
Right, yeah.
So it'll be something to monitor, and I know it might be a little tempting with how banged up San Fran is, but I would expect a lot of Gallman, and I would expect all three of their guys, Gallman, Lewis, and Freeman, to log a decent amount of snaps today.
Yeah, as much as I think he can lead the Giants in carries this week, there's just no way that I'm playing him except maybe in a really deep DFS tournament. And I'm not loading up on shares of him, just that it's your ultimate dart throw. He's just not someone, especially in my season. I have him in a 16-team season-long league, and I now even consider him my RB5. Again, that can change, but it's just there's just no way I can trust him in a season-long league. And now we got to get into the rash of injuries that is the San Francisco 49ers, who take on the Giants. Starting with Garoppolo. Excuse me. Sprained ankle, looks like. And for some, it took the 49ers much longer in the week to actually rule him out than everyone was expecting. All the word Sunday night last week was that he was going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, and yet as of Friday he hadn't even been ruled out by the team. So is this something that maybe you think Garoppolo, Derek, will shoot this over to you, is possibly only out 1 week, maybe 2, or do you think they were just trying to hide something and this is going to be the 4 to 6 week variety?
Look, it's tough to, I mean, we don't know the extent of the injury, but we do know that this team is completely different when Jimmy G's under center. This guy gets a lot of almost criticism, and rightfully so, off the Super Bowl last year. That's fine. And he might be the supposed weak link on this really strong team, but he comes in 2018, they're 5-0, and then he comes in last year and they're the 1 seed. They go from number 2 pick to 1 seed in the NFC, and they're 7 minutes away from winning the Super Bowl with this guy under center. You're down to Nick Mullins, who's a capable backup, but you're down to Nick Mullins, your 3rd and 4th running backs, no Debo, a banged up Brandon Ayuk, no George Kittle, no Weston Richburg. I mean, it's going to be really tough for the Niners offense today. It's going to be an uphill battle, but I think Jimmy G is that cog, that important piece where he isn't necessarily the best player, but he's by far the most valuable guy to make that offense tick. Yeah,
you were saying that they're down running backs, and that's a big thing was Raheem Mostert going down last week also. It doesn't look like it's going to be a full season thing for Mostert, but he's going to miss some time, and he's definitely out for today. Tom, who are you looking for out of the 49ers backfield to really take advantage of of missing Raheem Mostert, and also Tevin Coleman, who looks like is going to be out longer than Mostert?
Yeah, so the hot waiver wire pickup that I've been seeing in my leagues was Jedrick McKinnon. He took over once those guys went down last week. He had some solid touches, some solid runs. I'm really looking at that. And then Jeff Wilson is a guy that I think could eat into those carries that everyone is thinking McKinnon's going to get. He's more of a dark horse guy to come in, but he had some games last year in the goal line where he had 2 touchdown games. He's going to get some type of touches because McKinnon isn't the most reliable person to stay away from injuries, which is just not what the 49ers need right now. I think those two guys are really going to take over that workload that was being held by Mostert and Coleman.
Yeah, and it's fine because I look at this very similarly as I look at the Giants backfield. Deion Lewis should be the guy that is going to receive, especially the work in the passing game, and he'll get touches in the running game. But I think Jeff Wilson is probably going to lead the team in actual carries today. I think he's by far the better of the two between the tackles, runners, and especially if you're looking at DFS and potentially playing one of them against the Giants defense. I mean, he's so much cheaper than someone like McKinnon, who looked really good week one against was it the Saints, I believe. But just to see what is going to happen from this backfield. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers with Kyle Shanahan are one of the more elite backfields that you want to target just because of his system. And to now be down to your 3 and 4 guys can be beneficial in terms of DFS. It can also be a little harder to try and trust them in your season-long leagues. Gonna switch over to the biggest game time decision. We got a couple game time decision guys that we got to look at this week, and the first one is Julio Jones. From everything that I'm not expecting Julio Jones to play. I think that when a coach says he's a true game time decision, I think they're just trying to give the other team the thought that there's a better chance that someone's going to be playing than not. I think and we see this a lot from Julio. We see these injuries where he's never out for an extended period of time, but he's either he misses one game and that's it, or he plays and he's ineffective that exact week and he can really hurt your team. The only problem is that if Julio Jones is active, you have to play him. So Derek, what are you looking for when you're looking in terms of options with the Atlanta Falcons? If Jones is out, are you trusting Russell Gage, or is it only going to be Ridley?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The first 2 weeks, they absolutely tear it up through the air, but I'm a little cautious going into today. First week is a lot of garbage time against a really, really tough Seattle secondary right now that is not playing good football. And then Dallas last week, the shootout at Atlanta last week against Dallas. That's Matt Ryan against the Bears today. In general, I'm steering clear of that matchup. It's not going to be looking like the first 2 weeks. I think it's going to be way slower pace, not as much of an air attack from Atlanta. No garbage time points for those guys. If Julio does play, I think he gets the decoy treatment. So I think Ridley definitely is still a wide receiver one, a top 5 guy going this week. And I think Russell Gage is still going to work into the rotation enough where in PPR leagues, he's going to see a very good target share today. So I think he's definitely worth playing a low end 2 flex play with Julio's status going into today.
And Tom, in our chat, you had originally put for your duds portion that's going to be coming up in a little bit. You had put Russell Gage in as your dud, and then you took him out with the as we're getting closer to game time, it is looking a little bit more doubtful that Julio isn't going to play. What about the matchup was concerning you about playing Russell Gage?
So I was just worried that the Bears pass rush was going to get to Matt Ryan a little bit more. I know that they played some really good defenses these past couple of weeks, especially the Dallas Cowboys. But I was just worried that with Khalil Mack coming off the side against a weaker line, as I would describe it, I was afraid Matt Ryan was going to get hit a little bit more, and I'm still worried about that. But with Julio Jones out, I think that Russell Gage is going to step up a little bit. They're not going to, now that they don't have Julio Jones to worry about on that defense, they're going to focus a little more on Calvin Ridley, who is tied right now with, I believe, Stephon Diggs for the most receiving yards in the NFL. I think that Russell Gage is going to have a little bit better of a week if Julio is out. And another guy that I know that not specific to the question, but I think that Hayden Hurst could also step up depending on the pace of play and how the Falcons handle Khalil Mack and that defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are tuning into the live stream right now, if you have a line of questions, leave them in the comments. We will answer them live on air. The next sort of questionable or game time decision guy that we have is Jerry Jeudy. And I don't think a lot of us were expecting to have to rely on Jerry Jeudy so early in the season, but with the Cortland Sutton injury, Jerry Jeudy is now the de facto number one in Denver. And unfortunately, they also lost Drew Lock, unfortunately for Jeudy. And now they get someone like a Jeff Driscoll coming in. Driscoll has a little bit of experience while playing with Detroit last year. It wasn't very good, but Driscoll also didn't look half bad last week when he came in for an injured Drew Lock. The only thing is that we didn't see him showering someone like Jerry Jeudy with targets. Is Jeudy anywhere near the discussion for you guys in terms of the desire to play him with Jeff Driscoll, and in terms of the fact that he's questionable with this injury? Derek, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Jeudy this week?
I'm staying away. I got him in one league, and I'm just excited about the prospect of him seeing number one targets down the line. But he's getting the Carlton Davis treatment today against Tampa, who's proven as a more underrated corner. He's still a rookie going into his third game. I think it's kind of tough knowing Matt playing the number one corner. He's got to play most snaps injured with a backup quarterback. I'm targeting someone more like a KJ Hamler in a DFS format. And I expect Noah Fant to build off what he's done the first 2 weeks. But I think Jeudy is a guy, if you have on your fantasy team, that's awesome. Stash him. Don't play him this week. Don't rush into it. This is a long play, especially him working into those number one targets in Denver.
Yeah, how about you, Tom?
Yeah, I have him in, I believe, 2 leagues, and my one team in my main league has been absolutely destroyed by these injuries. So I am going to have to play him, as he is the second best wideout on my roster. But I'm only playing him over Dalton Schultz, who, had a great week, but we don't know who he's going to get. I'm really hoping that these targets go his way, but I'm also looking a little bit more up on Jerry Jeudy in these coming weeks, because you can't forget that the Broncos signed who was it? Blake Bortles. They signed Blake Bortles. He's had the starting experience, knows how to run an offense. Jeff Driscoll, as much as he looked good last week, I don't think he's their long-term starter, obviously, with Drew Lock. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Blake Bortles with Jerry Jeudy and getting him those targets like he did with DJ Chark in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and you look at someone, Jerry Jeudy, I think in terms of an actual physical build and a very similar style game to Allen Robinson, who Blake Bortles had a lot of success with in Jacksonville. So I think that obviously, again, we're not expecting a whole lot out of Blake Bortles. We don't even know if Bortles is part of their plans to start over the next week or so. It was a really wide time frame for Drew Lock. It was 2 to 6 weeks, so it's really tough to imagine what they're actually thinking about in terms of starters past this week. The last one that I want to bring up and that is the injury to Paris Campbell with Indianapolis. Saw a huge target share week 1. Third snap of the game last week goes down. It's not an ACL tear, but he's going to miss some time, a couple weeks. This leads to my belief that we're going to start to see the rise of Michael Pittman Jr. He's not someone that I'm willing to play yet in my season-long leagues. I think he's a very interesting DFS play this week, but I just really love the prospects of someone like a Michael Pittman, because I think he comps a lot to Mike Williams with the Chargers, who Phillip Rivers had a lot of success with. Is this going to be? And they've got a great matchup against your Jets this week. Is this going to be a matchup where we can see the rise of Michael Pittman, or are you expecting it to go to more of the bigger name guys like a T.Y. Hilton or a Jonathan Taylor? We'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, so I think that Pittman's going to have a pretty solid week because our Jets secondary is not the greatest. We all have seen that the first 2 weeks.
That's putting it lightly.
I was going to say, you're being nice.
I got to be nice. I'm wearing the gear, head to toe. I think this could be a really solid week for Pittman, but I'm more concerned about the share that's going to go through. You know, you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. He's been very good these first 2 weeks, but I think that he's just going to have a better and better week going forward. He's going to get more touches. He's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. You have Nyheim Hines, who blew up week 1. You mentioned T.Y. Hilton, but they also have Jack Doyle and I'm not sure if Trey Burton's back yet, but
no,
if he's
but
there,
they have another tight end who I am
Cox.
absolutely in love with in Dynasty.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was 6'7", 285.
Gigantor.
Gigantor. There you go. He's just somebody that really intrigues me. I picked him up on my Dynasty, on one of my 2 Dynasty teams, because I think that, I mean, the crazy stat that we saw last in terms of last week, there have been 30 games where Jack Doyle has received over 6 or more targets. He's reached 100 yards once. 30 games with at least 6 targets, reached 100 yards once. Mo Alley Cox, this was his first time receiving 6 targets, and he reached 100 yards. So it's just so tough to cover someone that large. And
he's got great speed too for a guy his size.
Yeah, he's not that lumbering sort of tight end that you would envision a 6'7" tight end from 1985. He's got the physical tools to. Not saying that he's Noah Fant or Evan Ingram in terms of speed and athleticism, but to me he's more athletic than Jack Doyle. So Mo Alley Cox is definitely a name that I am looking at in terms of the future. We do have a question from one of our viewers. Juju, Diggs, Robert Woods, pick 2 full PPR.
Ooh.
Derek, we'll start with you. Who do you like out of those 2? And for me, it's pretty easy.
I mean, I actually have Diggs as a dud, but there's just DFS formats because he's the second most expensive wide receiver, but you have to start Diggs. Up the first 2 weeks, he's Josh Allen's guy. The jolt he's given that offense is very, very apparent. You have to start Diggs. And I'm going with Juju just because of target share. Robert Woods had under 20 yards last week against my Eagles. I expect him to be way more involved, but going against a tough team like Buffalo, a tough secondary, I think Juju is just a way safer play this week. Go with Juju and Diggs.
I agree 100% with what he said.
Yep, same too for me. And I'm the Robert Woods truther. I have Robert Woods in a ton of my leagues, but we don't know who's going to get the Tre'Davious White treatment. It could be Woods. It could be Cup. It could be both. Both of them may see, but the matchup, especially, and we said Diggs is the one that had to be in. So for me, the question was between Juju and Woods. The matchup of Pittsburgh going against Houston is just so much better than the matchup of the Rams going against Buffalo. Thank you for the question. So now we're going to get into our big segment called Studs, Duds, and Sleepers. So we will start off with our studs this week, and we will start off with quarterbacks. Derek, who you got as your quarterback stud of the week?
I'm going with Super Cam against your Vegas Raiders. I was not the biggest Cam Newton truther going into the year, but I thought it was an intriguing fit with McDaniels. I still have my questions after week 1, and he answered all of them in week 2. And it had more to do with New England's receivers because Cam, I read a stat, he is delivering the ball at the highest average velocity per throw. He's making those outside the numbers, down the field passes that we weren't sure he was going to make. And Edelman was great last week. N'Keal Harry's getting a high target share, and he's at least reliable. I mean, everyone is questioning kind of the first-round prowess that guy has, but he's caught the ball. Last week we saw Damiere Byrd get 72 yards. He got in the mix, and he at least has some chemistry with Cam in Carolina. It's a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy. You're going to Vegas today. Vegas is feeling good about themselves at 2-0, but I'm not necessarily buying into that hype coming into New England today. Bill Belichick after a loss is great. And that Vegas secondary, it's all first or second year guys. Damon Arnett was benched last week. Travion Mullen has shown promise, second year guy. Amik Robertson, 4th-round rookie. And you have Jonathan Abram, who's really there to be a box safety. I think this is another very favorable matchup for the Patriots passing attack. I think I'm buying Cam as a top 5 quarterback from here on out, and I think he's a top 5 play this week. Play Cam Newton.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way that the NFL is structured right now, and especially with fantasy and how it is so geared towards the quarterbacks who can get you points in the ground game. There are 3 quarterbacks in the league that I think are the best running backs on their team. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Cam Newton. Cam Newton is I think Cam Newton leads the league in red zone in red zone touches, red zone carries. I mean, the fact that a quarterback is doing that in the NFL just shows you the trust that Belichick has in him. Tom, who you got as your quarterback stud this week?
We were kind of talking about this a little bit before when we were answering the question. I got Ben Roethlisberger versus Houston this week as my stud. Houston's D has given up 34 and 27 points in their first 2 games, and I know that they were playing the Chiefs and the Ravens, but they still gave up 369 total yards and 407 total yards in those first 2 weeks. And this is a passing offense. Ben has attempted 32 and 41 throws in the first 2 weeks and has had over 200 and over 300 yards in those games with 2 or 3 touchdowns in each of them. So I think that Houston secondary is just not going to be able to stop the Juju Deontay Johnson. And with the threat of James Conner still coming out of the backfield with either the runs or the catches, I think that's just going to be a really good matchup versus a bad defense.
Yeah, we'll get into the Pittsburgh Steelers offense a little bit more down the line. My quarterback stud of the week is Ryan Tannehill with the Tennessee Titans playing against the Minnesota Vikings. We're all waiting for the Vikings to show that they're the team, I guess, a lot of us thought they were going to be going into the season. But right now, this is just one of the more atrocious defenses in the NFL. You got to pick on them while they're playing bad. Do it until they prove it otherwise. Even without A.J. Brown, I think Ryan Tannehill, he gives you the option of getting points in the ground game. And him and Jonnu Smith have developed a really special connection. Corey Davis all of a sudden is showing signs of the player that they drafted in 2017 with the 5th overall pick. So even without A.J. Brown, this is still an offense that really hasn't missed a beat. The defense has been shockingly poor, which is why I think there's a chance that Minnesota may be able to keep up with them in terms of points, which won't allow the Titans to just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry every single down. I do think this is a great game for Derrick Henry, but I think it's a good game for almost everyone within the Titans offense. Running backs, who you got, Derek?
I'm going to go with Kenyon Drake against Detroit today. This is a Detroit defense that has yielded 5 yards of carry week 1, and then we saw Aaron Jones absolutely torch him, and he averaged over 9 a clip. And even if you take away his long 75-yarder to open up the second half, he still averaged 5.5 yards a clip. This is, despite Matt Patricia coaching him, not a sound and good defense. Kenyon Drake has shown signs of promise, and let's be real. He's faced 2 way more dynamic front sevens. It was San Fran when they weren't completely banged up in week 1, and that Washington D-line week 2. I think this is going to be a positive game script for Arizona. If things go their way, I expect Kyler to keep playing like he has the first 2 weeks, and these guys should be milking clock in the fourth quarter, leaning on a guy like Drake and Chase Edmonds. I think Drake has a very, very good chance of getting his first 100-yard game in week 3 today.
Yeah, I love Kenyon Drake, and he,
Drake.
I don't know if you saw his, I think it was a post on Instagram, where he basically said, trade me, you'll be sorry, to anyone who has him in fantasy. And I know that a lot of the players don't give a damn about someone else's fantasy team, but when you see these players who are interacting with regular guys who have them on their fantasy team, someone like a Juju Smith-Schuster, Juju is hysterical when it comes to talking about fantasy. And so when you see stuff like that, I dig it. I really think it's cool that they interact with their fans and their haters that way. Who you got, Tom, as your running back stud of the week?
My running back stud for this week is a guy that I've invested in multiple leagues in, Miles Sanders versus Cincinnati this week. He had 20 carries last week in his first game back, 7 targets. He's going to be the guy. That Eagles wide receiver core is beat up. I believe Jalen Reagor is also out this week. They're not going to have anyone to throw to, and Carson Wentz has not looked the greatest this year. There's no other way to say it. I know he played that Washington line, which absolutely murdered him in that backfield in week 1, and then week 2, he didn't look like the Carson Wentz that was in MVP contention a couple of years ago. So Doug Peterson said coming into the season, Miles Sanders was going to be their guy. He's going to be a 3-down back, and I think this is going to be a week where we see that versus a really bad Cincinnati defense, who has not really done anything spectacular so far throughout the season.
Yeah, one of the reasons I also have a healthy investment in Miles Sanders this year, and I know that there are some things that you can chalk up to coach talk, but there was one statement that Peterson had made during the offseason that stuck out to me, and it was they didn't want to limit Miles Sanders to 20 touches a week. So if you don't want to limit 20 touches a week nowadays is amazing. You
doesn't happen.
You get those guys in the top 5 of your draft because it doesn't happen too often. You're gonna tell me that if the Eagles had any sort of consistency in terms of staying healthy along the offensive line, Miles Sanders could end up being a top 3 pick. They just can't stay healthy, but there's just the opportunity that he's going to give. And I know you were the first one that got in your picks. Miles Sanders was going to be my guy this week. So, and I also really like the Kenyon Drake pick. The guy that I'm going with is I sorry, Tom, but it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. This is a Jets defense who has given up points in all facets of the game. They allowed San Fran without their best tight end, without their best 2 running backs, without their quarterback, still put up 24 points. This is an Indianapolis team that I think has the best offensive line in the league, and they have a commitment to giving him the ball. So you just put those things together, and Jonathan Taylor is my stud of the week at running back. Wide receiver, Derek, we'll lead off with you.
Take your pick of Seattle, but smash either Lockett or Metcalf. I would lean more towards DK just because I think Lockett has a much higher floor week to week, but DK is just, he's always a play away. And we're seeing that now, especially after his Sunday night game against Stephon Gilmore, where he absolutely bullied the best corner in the league, the 2019 Defensive Player of the Year. What Russell Wilson's doing this year is very special. And this is a team that's clearly committed to throwing the ball 30, 35 times a game with Russell Wilson back there. This Cowboys defense is already banged up without Leighton Vander Esch in the middle. And they actually did a pretty good job containing Gurley last week. I don't think Carson's really that same between the tackles grinder that they have, and they're using him way more as a receiver now. Russell Wilson is a great candidate for 300 plus and 4 and 5 touchdowns. I'm smashing DK, and you can't go wrong with Lockett either. It's 70 yards and a touchdown last week, but that's a guy in the slot is going to put up really good numbers week to week. He is their security blanket. Smash either one of them, but DK moving forward is an absolute stud.
Yep. Tom, who you got?
For the wideout, I got Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. They're playing the Kansas City Chiefs Monday night. It's going to be a high-scoring game. I'm having flashbacks to the Kansas City Chiefs, the LA Rams game that happened in Mexico City.
Oh, what a game that was.
Oh, my God. That was one of the best games I've ever witnessed. That was so much fun to watch. But Marquise Brown is the number 1 guy in that Ravens offense for the receiving end, maybe second to Mark Andrews, but I look at Andrews more for the red zone and for the touchdowns. But Marquise Brown is going to be the guy that's going to be getting a lot of Lamar Jackson's deep throws, deep throw receiver. The Kansas City corners are good. I think Marquise Brown is faster than a lot of them and is going to get open deep. The big thing for me and for him to truly be considered a stud is that he can't disappear in the second half. You know, you look at week 1 when he had 5 or 6 catches for 101 yards and then didn't even see a target in the second half. So I'm banking on the fact that this game's going to be high scoring and going, and, Lamar's going to have to go deep and it's going to be to Marquise Brown.
Yeah, you look at that, what the Ravens have done over the first 2 weeks, and they've had such a comfortable lead at halftime. They haven't had to rely on the passing game in the second half. And that's sort of what you need. You need, if you're putting a lot of trust in your wide receivers, you need to have that volume, and they just haven't needed to do that. Obviously, I think we're with KC, we're expecting KC to at least keep up with Baltimore this week. So he's definitely someone who, if you're playing DFS, he's not going to be in your main slate. And you look at the main slate this week, and you have 4 teams that usually put out a lot of offensive output into your DFS lineups. So you're going to be without the Sunday night game, which is Green Bay and New Orleans. And you're going to be without the Monday night game of KC and Baltimore. So it's going to be a really weird week in terms of the main slate, because you have so many players that usually have an impact on the main slate tournaments that aren't going to be there this week. My wide receiver stud of the week is the guy who is the most expensive wide receiver on both sites, and that's DeAndre Hopkins. This is They're playing a Detroit defense that, I mean, any one of us could probably start in the secondary right now. They're just so banged up. They traded away their best member of the secondary in the offseason, Darius Slay, to the Eagles. They're just giving points up at will in the passing game. And the connection that Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins have formed is unlike anything I've ever seen for a wide receiver new to a team. And then with the limited offseason that they had this year, for them to have developed what they've developed so far, DeAndre Hopkins broke the record for most catches in the first 2 games with a new team in NFL history. Broke the record. Having 14 in week 1 certainly didn't hurt, but I absolutely love the entire Cardinals offense this week. I said how much I like Drake. I do like Kyler Murray. Going to try and spend a little bit less in terms of DFS on my quarterbacks, especially this week when there's a bunch that are cheaper options. But I wouldn't fault anybody for using Murray. I think Larry Fitzgerald with Christian Kirk being out has a chance to put up something decent, and a deep play that I won't mention later on in my sleepers, but someone I do like is Dan Arnold down as the tight end there. So I was really hoping to put Kenny Golladay in this slot in terms of DFS. I just didn't like the fact that Kenny Golladay it hasn't been discounted at all on either site based on the fact that he hasn't played the first 2 weeks. He's still the 7th most expensive receiver on both sites, and it's just something the first week back, I'm not willing to invest that sort of money in terms of salary, but I do really like Kenny Golladay this week as well. And now to wrap up studs, we will go to our tight ends. Derek, who you got for your tight end stud?
We talked about Jonnu Smith, but I'm buying in. I think we're witnessing a breakout year for really good tight end in Tennessee and a tight end friendly offense. We're seeing Arthur Smith. This guy's gonna get head coach consideration going into next year. Yep. We're seeing teams already stacking the box, and Derrick Henry hasn't been the most effective, but he's still getting 4 yards a carry on average. And that's just going to open up the pass game even more for Tannehill and guys like Jonnu Smith. This guy's a Swiss Army knife. He runs routes like a receiver. He's a little under. It doesn't get much more favorable. They don't have Anthony Barr. They're sticking in Todd Davis as their strong side linebacker who's been there for a couple days. And that guy's there to make tackles. He is not there to cover. I think without A.J. Brown for another week, Jonnu Smith is looking at over 50 yards and definitely a favorable red zone guy in that offense. I think Jonnu Smith is a stud moving forward, but it doesn't get much better in terms of matchup than Minnesota today.
Love that pick.
Love the pick.
Tom, who you got?
This might be a little more of a questionable call, but I got Jordan Reed versus the Giants. You know, with Kittle out last week versus the Jets, 7 catches on 8 targets, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He absolutely dismantled the Jets anytime they threw him the ball. With Jimmy Graham coming out, or Jimmy Garoppolo coming out, they have Nick Mullins stepping in. He's going to need a safety blanket. That wide receiver core is not the greatest. I think he's going to rely heavily on Reed. And the Giants' D has allowed 26 points and 17 points and over 300 yards in both of their first 2 games. I just think that Shanahan's going to stick to his ground pound game, but when they do throw the ball, I have a very good feeling a lot of them are going to go to Jordan Reed.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the rule. If Jordan Reed is healthy and is going to be playing, and he's the number 1 tight end, you play him.
He's a top 6 guy.
He's obviously not the Jordan Reed that we remember from the early part of his career in Washington, but he proved last week that he can still play in the NFL.
It's kind of like a Vernon Davis when he went to Washington.
Yeah,
it was just kind of a flashback.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to watch.
Yep. So my tight end stud of the week is going to be Noah Fant in Denver, with Jeff Driscoll in there, with Jerry Jeudy being questionable. The rest of the wide receiver core in Denver is young and raw and inexperienced. I do like the prospects of KJ Hamler, someone I may not be looking into this week or at all with Jeff Driscoll at center. But we saw Driscoll target Noah Fant early and often from when he came into the game. Mm-hmm. And Fant had been producing even with Drew Lock. He's breaking out into being one of those top 6 tight ends to really get into that group with an Andrews, a Waller, and Ertz. And I really think that he has a chance to do it rest of season. So that's it for our studs. We will now go to our duds.
Before we do that,
yeah,
Ryan, I actually got a text from my father
about
a fantasy question.
All right.
He's asking Ryan Tannehill versus Minnesota or Justin Herbert versus Carolina.
Ryan Tannehill.
Tannehill.
That's what I told him.
No doubt.
Yeah, there's just that's what I told him. But he wanted to get in.
I mean, I like Justin Herbert, but Tannehill's my start of the week. So
yeah,
so I'm definitely going to go that way. So quarterback duds of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers, and this is for fantasy, and I just think it's a tough matchup going into this week, and quarterback storyline. He's on his revenge tour. He's angry. They didn't give him any help. But week 2 versus week 1, Aaron Rodgers was 2 different stories. Week 1, we saw Aaron Rodgers put up 360 yards against a very depleted Minnesota secondary. Week 2, I think, is what we're really going to get out of Aaron Rodgers, which was the 2019 Aaron Rodgers, which was the 13th highest scorer in standard formats at quarterback. Threw for 240 against the Lions. He didn't turn the ball over, but he is without Devontae Adams, most likely. He's listed as doubtful tonight against a Saints defense that got absolutely torched last week. I think these guys are going to play way better, and I think it's going to be a really low-scoring affair. And I also think just moving forward, Matt LaFleur wants to run the ball. They haven't extended Aaron Jones, but he's getting the same usage as last year. I think A.J. Dillon becomes more part of the equation as the season goes along, and it's not the Aaron Rodgers of old that we're used to seeing. I think we're going to see something closer to week 2 Rodgers than week 1 Rodgers going into New Orleans this week.
Yeah, you brought up a great name. We didn't even bring up Devonta Adams when we were talking about our injuries, and this is big because Devonta Adams, if he's healthy and active, you have to play him, but you also have to make sure that you have yourself covered. It is looking unlikely that he's going to play. If you want to take the chance and wait until we actually hear, again, he does play the Sunday night game. If you have to make sure that you have yourself covered with having either someone else from the Packers, the Saints, the Chiefs, or the Ravens that you can slide into that spot with Devonta Adams. If you can, move him to the flex. If you're looking to hopefully play him, move him into your flex, open up your opportunities to being able to replace him with someone like maybe you have a J.K. Dobbins. Maybe you have either Sammy Watkins or Mecole Hardman. Someone like an Emmanuel Sanders, Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith would be a very interesting piece to slide in, or an Alan Lazard or Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Tom, who you got as your quarterback dud of the week?
For my QB dud, I'm sticking in the same game as my QB stud. I think Deshaun Watson versus Pittsburgh is not going to look pretty whatsoever. That Pittsburgh defense, in my opinion, is the best in the league. And I know they haven't played the hardest teams yet, but they shut out the Giants, or not shut out, but they kept the Giants in check. Even without Saquon, they didn't allow over, I think it was 50 passing yards or something like that. Deshaun Watson does not have the receivers that he used to bail him out, i.e. DeAndre Hopkins. Brandon Cooks isn't going to get it done. Kiki QT, Will Fuller, and I'm missing one more, the big one. I'm missing one.
Brandon Cooks.
Oh, Brandon Cooks.
Oh, the big one they traded to Arizona. So
yeah.
Brandon,
no, there's definitely a problem there with that receiving core, and it's not going to get it done versus this Pittsburgh defense. Like I said, that I think is just the best in the league, and they're going to shut him out. And I feel really bad for Deshaun Watson in this situation.
Yeah. Watson would have been my quarterback dud of the week as well. But I decided to go in a way that maybe a lot of people wouldn't go based on the matchup, because you look at the Cincinnati Bengals as being probably a good way to get healthy. But you look at how teams are beating the Bengals, and it's on the ground, which is why we had Miles Sanders as a stud of the week. I have Carson Wentz as my dud of the week. There's just something that is off. He leads the NFL in uncatchable passes. His receiving core is awfully depleted. The clear best two targets that he has are his two tight ends. Deshaun Jackson's still on a pitch count. And I think that they're going to be able to run the ball, and it may not even just be with Miles Sanders. It may be they get Boston Scott involved. It may be they get Corey Clement involved. This is a defense that you can attack on the ground, and that's where I think the Eagles are going to go in this matchup. So I have Carson Wentz as my QB dud of the week.
Carson Wentz was my other choice.
Derek, who you got as your running back dud of the week?
We talked about him, but I'm just staying away from Mike Davis in all formats. In DFS on DraftKings, he's actually more expensive than guys like Singletary, Josh Kelly, Jed McKinnon, Jeff Wilson. That's a really big leap of faith to make in Mike Davis, just to assume that he's going to pick up that Christian McCaffrey work like we talked about. I just don't really see it happening today. He is a guy that has logged 1 carry in 2 weeks. The saving grace last week was he had 8 catches in the fourth quarter as soon as McCaffrey went down. But it was in a situation where Tampa Bay was in prevent defense. He got a lot of checkdowns. It's great. And he could be in something similar today against the Chargers. But Carolina has stayed somewhat competitive in their first 2 games. And I see a guy like Curtis Samuel really getting a lot more involved. And I see guys like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore having 100-yard games with Teddy Bridgewater slinging it back there in that Joe Brady offense. I don't necessarily see Davis just being the safe play to pick up that McCaffrey work. I just think it's way too risky with way better options on the board. I'm staying away from Mike Davis.
Yeah, it's tough because I think a lot of people, if you were able to acquire Mike Davis, you probably had to spend a lot of fab on him, and you almost feel like you're obligated to play him because of the fab that you spent. He seems to be the guy that is going to receive the most touches. But again, the matchup really scares me because I really do like that front of the Chargers. Again, if you are tuning in and you have a roster question, leave it in the comments and we will answer them live on air. Who you got as your running back dud of the week? Tom.
So for this one, I looked down to Tampa Bay. I got Ronald Jones versus Denver, solely for the fact that Leonard Fournette popped off last week and secured a significant role in that offense. Tom Brady's having a little problem down there. They're not really clicking. The passing isn't what it used to be. And Fournette stepped up last week, and that is going to cause him to get more touches, more carries, and that's going to come from Ronald Jones. It's not going to come from Tom Brady and his passing because they just went out and got him, and they have this super high-powered offense that they're going to try and get done. And Bruce Arians is not a bad coach. He's going to recognize that talent and take it away from Ronald Jones. And I know Arians said at the beginning of the season, he's our guy. To me, when I heard that was just more to keep Ronald Jones from getting upset. The more that we see Leonard Fournette, the more that he's going to take over that RB1 spot.
While it's on my mind, I know we're not at the tight ends yet, but if you have Rob Gronkowski on your team, drop him. There is no need to have Rob Gronkowski on your fantasy team right now. He is taking up space, and you better not even be starting. Yeah, he's become the blocking tight end, and OJ Howard. I mean, Howard didn't even have a great game last week, but Howard and Brait are their two pass catching tight ends this year, and they're finally going to have Godwin and Evans healthy for the first time in the first 3 weeks. My running back dud of the week is going to be one of the bigger names, and it's going to be Nick Chubb. They're going against Washington, who has been, I think they're the third best team against in terms of giving up points to running backs this year. If they're going to be beaten, they're going to be beaten in the passing game, which is why I think we can see a big game from Kareem Hunt. I think Hunt has a better game than Chubb this week. Obviously, if it's your season-long league, it's almost impossible, especially with all the injuries, to keep Chubb out of your lineup. But in terms of DFS, there's just no way that I'm investing any shares of Nick Chubb this week. Wide receiver duds. Derek, who you got?
We talked about him. I mentioned Stephon Diggs, and this is in DFS formats. He's the second most expensive receiver going this week. In your fantasy lineups, you're playing him. He's been absolutely electric, and I think he's absolutely going to be Josh Allen's go-to guy. But he's going into a matchup against Jalen Ramsey. In week 2 against the Eagles, he didn't allow a catch in 41 coverage snaps. And I get Carson Wentz in the receiving core of the Eagles right now versus Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs is way different. But it's something that it's just not worth the $7,000 you have to pay in salary in DraftKings or $7,500 on FanDuel when you can get a lot more cost-effective guys. Jalen Ramsey is one of the more emotional guys in the league. I think he has circled this matchup, and it's going to be a duel. And I still expect Diggs to have a decent game, but it's just something I'm staying away from. Dealing with Aaron Donald in the middle, I think they're going to be a lot more on the ground than they were last week with Josh Allen and Devin Singletary. I'm staying away from Stephon Diggs in DFS formats.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's someone who, like you said, in your season-long leagues, you have to have in your lineup right now. But it's going to be tough to invest the salary that he is garnering this week. Tom, who you got?
This kind of goes against your quarterback start of the week, but I am very afraid for Corey Davis this week versus Minnesota. Not for the fact that he's going to have a terrible day, but I believe that he's getting overhyped a little bit. You know, with A.J. Brown out, he is looking like the number one guy. And yes, he had a solid week. But Minnesota has not been a great defense. Jonnu Smith starting to emerge as a very pass-heavy favorite for Ryan Tannehill. They do have Derrick Henry in the backfield. I just think that the Titans are going to go elsewhere, and Corey Davis is not going to get the amount of points that he's being projected for, and everyone is expecting him to get. So it's not that I'm thinking that he's going to do bad. It's just the hype around him is starting to get a little too much.
My wide receiver dud of the week is going to be Keenan Allen. And again, a lot of people are going to look at the matchup and say they're going against Carolina. How are you fading Keenan Allen? You want to know why? And this will show with my my sleeper running back of the week. The Carolina Panthers are giving up over 120 yards a game and 3 touchdowns a game to running backs over the first 2 weeks. You just don't need to pass the ball against Carolina to beat them. I think we're going to see huge weeks out of Austin Eckler and my running back sleeper of the week. This I don't expect this game to be very competitive, especially after halftime, where we can just see a ton of work go to the running backs. I did like Keenan Allen's target share last week as opposed to week 1. But again, like I said, I just don't think the necessity to pass the ball. I'm not even projecting Justin Herbert to throw the ball 20 times today. So that shows the amount of faith that I have in their running game. Wide receiver duds. I'm sorry. Tight end duds of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'm actually going to go with TJ Hawkinson, who I've seen as a sleeper for some guys this week. And it's a little tempting. It's Arizona, the team he had 130 yards and a touchdown in his rookie debut last year. It's the same Arizona that gave up by far the most points to tight ends last year. But there are a lot of red flags with TJ Hawkinson moving forward. Through 2 weeks, he's only yielded a 12% target share. They get back Kenny Golladay, their stud today. That is a huge red flag for me. Isaiah Simmons is going to get more and more comfortable. This is not the 2019 defense that yielded the most points to tight ends. It is going to have an absolute freak and matchup nightmare for tight ends and Isaiah Simmons week to week. This is just not a Detroit Lions offense that really looks to feature TJ Hawkinson for whatever reason. I think he's there more to block. He's there more to be that guy that can catch a pass down the seam, but he doesn't yield 8-9 targets a game like we thought he maybe could. And with Kenny Golladay coming back, stay far away from Hawkinson today. I don't even think he's worth playing in your fantasy leagues. If you have another option, maybe like a guy like Jonnu Smith, I'm staying away from Hawk today.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I absolutely love what Isaiah Simmons has brought to that team. Just the athleticism and physicality that he's brought over the first 2 weeks has really made a big difference in their defense. Who you got as your tight end dud this week, Tom?
So for my tight end dud this week, it's kind of been a guy who's been a dud the past couple of weeks. It's Austin Hooper with the Browns versus the football team. The Browns, we're all still getting used to it. That's my bad. He hasn't done anything, and the Browns O-line is a mess. They can't stop that pass rush that Washington has displayed the first 2 weeks. He's not involved with that offense, and if they do have the offense, it's going to go to someone like Chubb, Beckham, or Landry. And, you thought with Njoku going down week 1, Hooper would see even more targets, but it's just it hasn't percolated, and I don't think this week is going to be any different.
Yeah, man. I feel. So my tight end dud of the week is going to surprise a lot of people, especially after the week that he had last week against the Saints, and that's going to be Darren Waller. He has been battling. He hasn't practiced a whole lot this week. Been nicked up, and we've seen Bill Belichick in the past not care about who a team's where a team's best receiver is going to come from. He's going to put their best cover corner on someone's best receiver. And right now it's clear that Darren Waller is that guy in Vegas. I expect Stephon Gilmore to see a lot of Darren Waller today. And especially, again, Waller, if he's in your season-long league, you have to play him. But in terms of DFS, he's the second most expensive guy this week. I'm staying far away from Darren Waller because Bill Belichick knows how to take away a team's best option, and that's where I think he's going to focus this week. Sleepers. We're going to quickly roll through our sleepers. But before we do, some of the inactives are coming across. And Julio Jones is inactive today. So make sure you are updating those lineups. Get him out. And this does make Russell Gage an interesting play. So sleeper quarterbacks. Derek, we'll start with you.
You guys were hating on my sleeper earlier, Jeff Driscoll. I mean, and I think it's fair to hate on the quarterback, Jeff Driscoll, but not the fantasy quarterback, Jeff Driscoll. What if I were to tell you in his 3 starts in 2019 that Jeff Driscoll averaged the second most rushing yards per game among quarterbacks? This was a guy in his 3 starts that yielded 37, 51, and 63 rushing yards in his 3 games, and he was the 12th, 5th, and 13th highest scoring quarterback, respectively, in those games. He came into Pittsburgh last week and he threw for 250 in relief of Drew Lock. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be high completion percentage throws. And there's a Tampa defense that's a little stingier than we maybe thought going into the season. But I think Driscoll is a really good sleeper play on DFS formats. He's one of the cheaper quarterbacks in the entire league. And this is a guy that puts up 200, 250 passing yards, and he's going to run the ball almost at the same output as a guy like Josh Allen. Is he the quarterback that Josh Allen is? Absolutely not. But he is a solid fantasy play moving forward. I like Jeff Driscoll today.
Who you got as your quarterback sleeper, Tom?
My quarterback sleeper this week is the most underrated and underappreciated quarterback in the league, Matt Stafford. That guy always finds a way to build something when he's got nothing around him. And now that he's getting Kenny Golladay back this week, I think that it's going to be it's obviously going to be a difficult day versus the Cardinals, and it's probably not going to be the kind of day that you want out of a QB1. But Stafford is definitely one of those guys that just makes things happen, and I will always put him down as a sleeper.
Yeah, I think Kenny Golladay helps Matt Stafford a lot more this week than Matt Stafford helps Kenny Golladay in terms of production. I think Golladay is going to open up the rest of the offense. I think that it could be a Marvin Jones week this week because we've seen Marvin Jones not necessarily be able to handle being the number 1 guy, but he's one of the best number 2s in the league. My quarterback sleeper of the week is going to be Daniel Jones. He offers a lot with his mobility. He's going up against a 49ers defense who's without half of their starting lineup, including their 2 best pass rushers. Their number 1 cornerback, and they're playing at home. Where, again, last week you saw the 49ers, and even throughout the week, they were complaining about the MetLife Stadium turf playing against the Jets last week. They're going to have to play on that same field this week. And who knows if that's going to be in their heads. Without Saquon Barkley, the Giants offense is going to have to go through Daniel Jones. And on both FanDuel and DraftKings, he's the 21st most expensive quarterback. So, and with having 4 guys that on the main slate that are not there this week because they play Sunday night and Monday night, so that means he would have been the 25th if you're taking everybody else. So to have him that far down on the chart, I think he's a really good DFS play.
I really like that. Oh,
running back sleepers. Who you got, Tom?
I'm gonna go with Devin Singletary, and I almost wanted to put him in my studs, but he's pretty cheap right now. He's going for $4,900 in DraftKings. And this is a guy that isn't going to have to compete with work today. Zach Moss is out, and Devin Singletary's output's been good. It's just been pretty small volume going into this week. But without Zach Moss, if Devin Singletary is going to yield 16-plus carries, I like him a lot. His yards per carry has been really good the first 2 weeks. I don't think Buffalo's going to throw it around like they did last week against Miami without Byron Jones. This is a much better defense in LA today. I think they slow the game down and they run the ball with Josh Allen and Devin Singletary a lot more, and he's going to get that goal line work without Zach Moss.
I really like Singletary this week as well. Tom, who you got?
A guy I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the injuries, Jeff Wilson versus the Giants. I really do think that he's going to get a lot of those goal line carries because they're not going to want to get McKinnon down and dirty in there and risk losing another running back, and especially their starters. So I really like Wilson for the touchdown dependency.
My running back sleeper of the week goes in line with my wide receiver dud of the week. I'm going to take Joshua Kelly, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers. He currently has the same amount of carries as Austin Eckler, and they're both tied for the 8th most amount of carries in the NFL right now. They're utilizing him. He out-touched Austin Eckler last week against the Chiefs. It's going to be a very positive game script. Again, I'll bring up the stat. So far, the Carolina Panthers have given up over 120 yards and 3 touchdowns per game to running backs. I just love everything about the Chargers running game this week, and with him being so cheap, especially on the DFS sites, give me a lot of Joshua Kelly. Wide receiver sleepers, Derek, who you got?
I'm going to go in Tom's neck of the woods. I'm going to go with Braxton Berrios and the Jets. He's a deep sleeper. If you want to stack up the rest of your lineup and you don't have that much money left for maybe a wide receiver 2 spot or a flex spot, I'm going to go with Berrios. He's assuming the slot receiver role in the Jets offense where Crowder had 120 yards and a touchdown week 1. Berrios stepped in and had a garbage time touchdown, 60 yards in week 2. The Jets are going to be losing today. They're going to be losing big in the second half. Darnold's going to have to throw from behind. Someone has to catch the ball. Herndon is a good name, but Darius Leonard's one of the better cover linebackers in the league. In that slot position, you got to think that Berrios is going to get those easy targets. I expect him to see 8-9 targets today. I like Berrios for the cheap in DFS formats.
Yeah, man, they're going to have to throw the ball a ton.
Yep.
and someone has to get
it. Yeah, someone.
Well, and even with Crowder out, it's not like, oh, you could just throw it to Perriman. Perriman's out too.
Right.
There's literally no one for the Jets.
No Mims, no Perriman.
Nope. Nothing. And you don't have any of your top 3 guys.
To be honest, with the struggles, and I think a lot of people thought the Jets sort of figured out their offensive line issues by signing 5 new players.
Yep,
turns out it seems that you actually need consistency along an offensive line in order to be good.
Who would have thought?
And their offensive line has not been good, which has meant they've needed to keep Chris Herndon in a lot to block. And I would have loved Chris Herndon in some of these matchups. They're just not utilizing him the way that he really could.
Well, and I think out of those 5 guys that the Jets signed, I think 2 of them are out today.
Yeah.
George Fant, and I forget who the second one is, but out of those 5 guys that we signed, 2 of them are out. So it's going to be a massacre again today. And deep sleeper, sure, but I'm staying away from my guys this week. I don't even know how I'm going to get through the whole game.
Tom, who you got as your wide receiver sleeper?
A guy that I am waiting to still break out, CeeDee Lamb with versus the Seahawks. I've been waiting for him to kind of have that game where we're like, wow, this is the guy that we saw at Oklahoma. He had the highest run yards after catch in all of college football. And this is a guy that I've been waiting to see break out. And I think with the fact that I think it's going to be a high scoring game again today. It's going to be a good game. I hope I get to sit down and watch. I think this is going to be a guy that Dak is going to target a lot. And I think that this is going to be the game that he can break through and break out for one of those long touchdowns that we all remember seeing.
Yeah, my wide receiver sleeper of the week, and I don't know why he is being disrespected on the DFS circuit, but for someone to be Ben Roethlisberger's number 1 receiver and to be $6,300 on FanDuel, Deontay Johnson, he's leading the team in targets both weeks. I believe he also has more yards than Juju Smith-Schuster in each of the weeks. to me, he seems like even though I know everyone looks at the 2 touchdowns that Juju scored in Week 1 against the Giants, Deonta has been able to find the end zone, and in a PPR setting, Deonta Johnson just said it. He's going to be one of the safer wide receivers you're going to have for the rest of the season. To wrap up the show, we have our tight end sleepers of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'm gonna go with Mo Cox, who we talked about earlier. And this is pending if Doyle's out, but we've seen it. Frank Reich wants to get the tight end involved in this offense. No Paris Campbell. T.Y. Hilton drops a big touchdown pass last week. It's not the T.Y. that we're used to seeing. And look, Mo Cox, former basketball player, and we talked about it. Huge body, really athletic, and he's going to get a big target share if Doyle's not playing today, just by the way that offense wants to play. I like Mo Cox against about the best matchup you can get in the Jets.
How about you, Tom?
This is a guy that I've been really high on since drafts had started going on. Hayden Hurst for Chicago. We saw him have a good game last week in that depressing loss to the Cowboys. But Hayden Hurst is going to get more targets with Julio Jones out today. And I think that he's going to have a very similar game, if not a better game, than he had last week. And I don't think I don't know much about the FDS stuff, but I'm sure that he's not one of the top 5 most expensive guys.
No. So I'll wrap it up, and I'm going to wrap it up with someone who really had their first true game of their career last year. That's Drew Sample. This will be his first start, but he took over for an injured CJ Uzama. I believe it was in the first quarter of the game last week against Cleveland, and all he did was manage 9 targets, 7 catches, almost 100 yards. This kid and Joe Burrow over the first 2 weeks has shown he's willing to throw the ball to the tight end, which is something that you see a lot from rookie quarterbacks. He trusts Drew Sample. There's a good chance that if the Eagles get out to an early lead, it's another one of those 50 attempt games for Joe Burrow. And I think that even if you see a 15 to 20% target share from Drew Sample, which isn't a whole lot, that if he throws the ball 50 times, that's still going to be 7-8 targets. I think that Drew Sample is someone who is awfully cheap on DFS and is going to, I think, is going to make sure that he provides with a great return on investment. So that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Derek, Tom, thank you for joining us. It was a little longer than we had expected, but it was good to be able to at least get some of the inactives. Again, Julio Jones is inactive. Get him out of your lineups. Devonta Adams, if you want to attempt to play him, make sure that you have somebody that's playing on Sunday night or Monday night to put in his spot. Again, you can find us on Twitter with Backsports page, on all social media outlets at Backsports page. You can find me on Twitter at rstern33. Derek is at Derek Mountain. Tom is at THB315. Guys, thanks a lot, and looking forward to doing it again next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.